Here I'm going to walk you through some extras that you may play around with if you like. And if you continue playing, you'll come across some of these tools and techniques later on. They're a little bit more advanced than what we generally do in the beginning class, but these are some fun things you can purchase that are not expensive that you can play around with in your spare time, like you have any spare time. Here's the first one. It's called a capo. There are different spring-loaded ones that you can put on, and basically what it's going to do is raise the pitch of the guitar by however many frets you put it on. Now you should know that correctly this is pronounced capo, not capo, capo, because it is an Italian word which means head or top. And so when we put on the capo, what we're doing is we're raising the head of the guitar from being here to wherever we put it, first fret, second fret, third fret. Okay? I'll use the American pronunciation of capo. That's normally how you'll hear it in this country. These are inexpensive. They are between $10 and $20. You don't need to spend more than that. There are many different kinds. You will want to get one that fits your guitar. So either a steel string capo or a nylon string capo. Remember, the nylon string has a wider neck. So if you try to use a steel string capo, it's not going to fit across all the 6 strings on your nylon string guitar because they are spaced out wider. Just be aware of that. Here we go. How do you use a capo? Why do you use a capo? Well, as I've mentioned, the main reason to use a capo is to raise the pitch of the guitar. Why would you do that? Well, it's often used for singers so that you can use the same chords that you learned, but instead of having to learn all new chords and play it in a different key, you can just use the capo at whatever fret you want to raise it to and then play the same chords. For example, let's say I'm playing through Imagine. Now this is the original key of the recording, but let's say I'm singing along with that and it's too low for my voice. What I can do then is raise it up. Maybe I'll put this on the first fret. Okay, now I'm done with that fret. That's the end of my guitar. So now this is my first fret. And so these are my open strings. And so if I want to play Imagine now, I would play the C chord again as if it were here, but now that I have the capo, that becomes the nut essentially. And now this is my first fret, second fret, third fret. So now it's a higher pitch by 1/2 step, and that might match my voice better. So the advantage is that it makes it easier for you to switch keys to match your vocal range. If that's still too low, maybe I'll do it in the 3rd fret. Etc. So the capo is a really handy device to use, and sometimes in recordings, they will have recorded something with a capo. So if you're looking up the sheet music and it says capo at 2nd fret, you know that in order for you to play this song along with the recording, you're going to need that capo at, in that case, the 2nd fret to play along. So it matches the key of the recording. All right, that's your crash course in capos. A lot of different kinds. They don't need to be expensive. They all work the same way. The next thing I'd like to talk about are slides. I've got a few of them here, and I have a glass one also. Okay, now of course you wouldn't play them all on you wouldn't play them all on your fingers at the same time. You're going to use one finger for the slide, but I have the different materials to show you how it works. So you've probably seen this before. You can use any smooth, cylindrical thing that fits on your finger. You don't even have to use on your finger. If you've seen country musicians play, they'll often play in what's called a lap steel, and they just hold it like this. But for our purposes, we're generally doing on our finger. A lot of people use it on the third finger. And what it's doing is essentially bypassing the frets. So when you press down your finger and you slide up the neck, that's called a glissando, you're going to hear those bumps of the frets. To avoid that, you use a slide, and now the trick of the slide is it takes a very light touch. I'm not going to actually press down on the string, I'm just going to touch it to the string, thereby bypassing the frets. I'm still in contact with the string and I want to keep it flat. This is used a lot in country music, Hawaiian music, blues music. There are many songs that use this slide technique. And it does require a bit of practice. Also, guitars that use slide exclusively have a much higher action, meaning the strings are much further away from the fretboard, if I can show you like that, because then you don't have to worry about hitting the frets as you're using the slide. A guitar like this, where the action is very low, it's hard to not press down and accidentally hit the fret like I just did there. So I would recommend getting a slide, and you probably want to get one that fits on your third finger. I like, though, to have it on my fourth finger, and the reason is if I'm playing something, I can still leave it on and play most of my basic chords without having to re-finger the chords. If you have it on the third finger, then you have to rework the chords with different fingering, which may or may not be a problem. Something to explore and play around with. If you've ever watched SpongeBob cartoon, you'll hear a lot of slide guitar in that. There's a song, I'll play you a Beck song that uses a slide. Now I'm tuning this sixth string down to a D. This is an old song called Loser, which is a great song if you've never heard it. And I'll put it on my third finger. So the song goes something like this. So you've probably heard that sound before, and that's what using a slide sounds like. I'm going to tune back up to E here. Okay, and the last thing I want to show you is, one thing about the slide, which I almost forgot to mention. When you're playing with the slide, what's different about using a slide is that you are going to play directly above the fret wire. Remember, you're not pressing down against it, you're just lightly touching. Because the way that any fretted instrument works, the true pitch is happening at the fret wire. So when you press down in the middle of the fret, that string is actually stopping at the fret wire. You're pushing it against that fret wire, and then that true pitch is happening right at that fret wire. Just like the open strings, the true pitch is happening right at the nut. Which means that if I'm going to play a melody, with the slide, I'm going to be placing my finger right over the fret wire, not here. And that's because, listen to the difference. When I play this note, say A, normally when I'm playing, I'm going to be pressing maybe here just behind the fret wire, or it's okay if I play in the middle. Easiest is there. But notice when I put the slide in the middle of the fret, hear how that's below, it's flat? So to get this pitch using a slide, I have to play right over this fret wire here. This is a bit like playing the violin. It's very touch sensitive, by the millimeter flat or sharp. So it's harder in a lot of ways. Requires a certain touch and a lot of practice. But get a slide or two. The material doesn't matter. They have different sounds. This is brass. This is steel. This one is glass. I like the sound of this one. It's a little warmer sound. And this one is ceramic. So those are the 4 different types. They should all be under $20 again. And you probably have to try on the size to, unless you know your ring size on your finger, to see if it fits comfortably over your finger. You don't want it too tight or too loose. And you can look up lots of tutorials for using a slide online. Okay, last thing. This is a fun thing to do with the 12-bar blues. So we learned the 12-bar blues last week, and what we learned is the A chord. So one of the keys we did it in was A. And so your 1, 4, 5 chord would be A, and then D, and then E for the 5 chord. So 1 is A, D is 4, E is 5. And you would put it into that pattern of 4 measures on the 1 chord. Then you would go to the 4 chord for 2 measures, in this case D. Then you would go back to the 1 chord for 2 measures. Then you would go to the 5 chord, which would be E. Then the 4 chord, which is D. And then the 5 chord, which is A. So that's your 12-bar blues across those 12 measures. Remember, it has to be exactly counted out for it to sound like that. 12-bar blues chord progression. Okay? Now, another way to do that you more often hear it performed, is to, instead of playing the full chord, A, we're going to do instead the root note of A and the 5th above it, which is just an E. So we're going to play just these 2 notes. And that's rhythm, bum, 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 bum. That's called a shuffle rhythm. So often in blues, you will do this shuffle rhythm instead of a straight, which is a little dull. So you can play this for your A, but remember, you're plucking only the 5th string open and the 4th string 2nd fret. That's going to take the place of your A chord. And you can use 1st finger. That would be 1 measure. So you would do 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, to get to the 4 chord, the D, in this case, instead of doing our full D chord, we're just going to move this up to play 4th string open and 3rd string 2nd fret, the first 2 notes of the D chord. Now you're going to strum just 4th and 3rd together. That's the root D and the 5th A. So those 2 notes will be your A chord, your D chord rather. Then we would go back to the A chord. This is really easy, and it sounds more like the blues than what we were doing before. Now, can you guess what we do for the E chord? Instead of that, we're going to do the root and the 5th again. So this would be the 6th string open and the 5th string 2nd fret. Your root is E, your 5th is B. So you would play just these 2 strings now. Shuffle rhythm still. So your chords are going to be A, D, E. Super easy, okay? Now we're going to add something to it. Now we're going to add the 6th note. So this is called an A5 because it's the root A and the 5th above it. And then we're going to add a 6th, which would be the F note, in this case, F sharp. You've probably heard this before. Okay, I'm a little bit out of tune. So I'm going to fix that. You know what they say, close enough for rock and roll. Or blues in this case, which have a lot of overlap. Okay, so there we are. The A chord, the D chord, and the E chord. Now you can do this same idea in other keys, but it is more complex. So to do it in A works best because the A chord is just these 2 notes, the D chord, those 2 notes, the E chord, just those two notes. Okay, now what we're adding to that is to be adding the sixth note of the scale, so A5 to A6. You're just adding the third finger to the fourth fret. You can leave this finger down the whole time. Still only hitting those two strings, so that's going to be for your A. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's how you're counting the beats. Okay, then when we want to go to the D, we're going to do the same shape, but now on the third string, plucking only fourth and third. Then we go back to A, and then for the E, you guessed it, we drop down to here, and then D. Now the trick is keeping accurate count of the chord progression for those 12 measures. That takes practice, listening to it a lot, and paying attention when you're counting, because it's very easy to get lost until it becomes really subconscious. So I'm going to play through it once with this 5 to 6 pattern, A5 to A6, A5 to A6, and I'm going to count it out, and you can, remember, slow it down. You can play along with it at this tempo. And then I'll show you one more thing which sounds really cool to add to it. Okay, I'm going to move over this way. All right, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now D. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Back to the A. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then E. 1, 2, 3, 4. D. Back to 1. And then you would start over again. Okay, that would be the one time through of the whole 12-bar blues using the shuffle rhythm and the 5 to 6 chord. Still using Roman numeral 1, but instead of doing A, we're doing A5 to A6 back and forth. Using D for our 4 chord, but instead of doing a straight D, we're doing D5 to D6. And then E would be our 5 chord, but instead of doing the full E major chord, we're doing E5 to E6. All right? So it's a stripped down version, but it's often what you hear represented more in blues and rock and roll. So that sound should be familiar to you. It's, again, in thousands of songs, probably tens of thousands. Okay, one last thing to play around with, which is really cool sounding and also used a lot in the blues, especially when you want to bring the volume down to allow the singer to sing the verse or chorus. You do what's called a palm mute. Palm, P-A-L-M, mute, M-U-T-E, meaning silent. And you do this by putting your right hand, your strumming hand, right up against the bridge here so that you are muting the strings. Now, we don't want to be over too far because then I can't hear the pitches. I want to be touching right where the strings meet the saddle there, actually, so that you can still hear the pitch, but it's muted. Instead of that, you hear, but you can still hear which notes I'm playing. Okay, that's the real key, and that takes practice. It's not super easy at first, so you're gonna try to have your hand right up against that so that you're getting this. The sound that you want is the equivalent of pizzicato on a violin, where you pluck the strings instead of bow them. That's kind of the sound that we're looking for. And if you see PM in a song sheet or tablature, that stands for this palm mute technique. And you're actually using the side of your hand. You're not really using the palm. You have to do it with the side, especially if you're using a pick. So what we're doing then is we're going to play through the 12-bar blues using this palm mute. I'll count us in, and it sounds really great. And it brings the volume down a bit, so you might have the first part of the song loud, and then when the singer starts coming in, it drops down so that you can hear the vocals. Okay, here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now D. Back to A. Then we go to E. Then D. Back to A. All right, so we talked about the capo. Get one. They're great to have. The slide. Get one. Any style will do. Ceramic, glass, brass, or steel. And then we talked about the 12-bar blues with this different chord simplification and the shuffle rhythm. Bum, 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 bum. And also the palm mute. I hope you have fun with those ideas.